2 tournaments, 2 title winner portraits to pose with. Never mind the cold, wet January weather, this was another of Hakuho's dreams come true. His sumo brilliance permanently depicted in art above both his shoulders, the portraits to be hung for 5 years in the Kokugikan, then in other venues until long after his retirement. But behind the perfect exterior lay a mind laden with concern. The journalists smilingly scribbling down his quotes were the same ones beginning to question his yokozuna worth. 5 tournaments won, yes, but 3 in Asashoryu's absence, including the 2 being celebrated that day. The first of those, September 2007, had seen Hakuho drop the opening bout to Ama and left trailing top division debutant Goedo after a further humbling by Toyonoshima on day 11. The following November saw him again drop the first match to Kotoshogiku, lose to Ama for the second time straight on day 8, and get thrown down by Kotomitsuki on day 15. Asked somewhat cheekily if a 12-3 title win was acceptable for a yokozuna, Hakuho icily replied, "A title's a title." Inside, though, he realized that despite Asashoryu's advice not to rush things, he was regularly dropping bouts in the early stages and needed to unearth the reason why. And as he posed with those portraits in January 2008, he was preparing for another challenge looming on the horizon, the whirlwind return of Asashoryu, suspended for the past 5 months for playing football in Mongolia while allegedly injured. In their last meeting prior to that suspension, Hakuho was unquestionably junior yokozuna. He even acted like it. But now, Asashoryu was a yokozuna several months out of practice. Defeat to him would make a huge dent in Hakuho's pride. As the hostile questions in November had suggested, this was where Hakuho's true value as a yokozuna would be measured. Far quicker than he ever expected, he would have to project the aura of sumo's number 1. The nerves were jangling all over during his dress rehearsal at the All Stables practice that week. He knew the sumo media corps had turned up expecting to find a rusty Asashoryu ripe for humiliation. What he instead found was, as Ozumo magazine described, exactly the sort of man who can turn humiliation and regret into extra engine power. The 2 yokozuna fought 7 times that day amid the camera flashes, and Asashoryu won 5, roaring with each impact, even diving forwards to flip Hakuho's leg over at the rope. Such was his desire to win. Hakuho's initial shock was evident. "I'll do my best to keep up with him," was all he felt confident enough to say. But away from the glare of the cameras, he stiffened his resolve. "I absolutely can't lose to a man who's been out for several months," he declared. Besides, Asashoryu always dominated training. His opponents likely still bear the scars. But it was no guarantee of his temperament holding up in front of a crowd. In the event, it took but 2 days for Asashoryu to crack. After beating Kotoshogiku with none of the assuredness he'd shown in practice, he panicked against Kiseno Sato on day 2, rushing into a neck throw which had no chance of success, and ending up hurtling into the audience. Hakuho coolly registered things at ringside and proceeded to rack up the wins. Kotoshogiku, Kiseno Sato, and fellow youngster Goedo overcome with minimal fuss. Asashoryu, over-eager to impress, continued to toil. Toyonoshima smashed through his throat hold to get inside him on day 5. Dejima drove him backwards on day 7, Tochino Nada fought him to a long standstill on day 8, and Ama, following this training session, gave him another heart-stopping belt battle on day 9. In all cases, only a last-ditch throw or lightning reaction at the rope saved Asashoryu's face. But as he shot his latest customary glare towards Hakuho in his ringside seat, he saw a junior yokozuna increasingly concerned by his penchant for winning out of nothing. On day 10, the pressure of being pursued by a Houdini artist finally got to Hakuho. Angered by Ama's face slap, he swung wildly and was punished with an overarm throw. The watching Asashoryu sprang out of his seat, swaggered onto the dohyo, and coolly forced out Waka no Sato to tie level. Game on. On day 11, although the snow-covered arena was half empty, the noise for Asashoryu's multiple stare-downs with Koto Oshu was deafening. Most people there considered him the odious Yokozuna, despised everything he stood for, yet they were still fascinated by how he fought back. When he outwitted Koto Oshu and sent him crashing into the clay, the collective shiver of excitement was palpable. Hakuho was being pushed further than at any time since his Yokozuna promotion, and he showed his increased maturity with a solid push-out of Aminishiki. 10 wins apiece. Day 12, Hakuho defeats Koto Oshu by scoop throw. Back comes Asashoryu with a force-out of Aminishiki. 11 wins apiece. Day 13, Asashoryu is met with a rampaging Koto Mitsuki, furiously trying to avenge the 27 straight defeats he's suffered against him. Mitsuki actually gets a double inside grip, bulldozes Asashoryu to the rope, and still the Blue Dragon resists, jerks his right hand inside, and with the tightest of grips, unleashes the inner arm throw, while moving backwards. Another glare at Hakuho, who sits arms folded, face like thunder, wondering how many lives this self-destructive Yokozuna will be given by the sumo gods. Again, he clears those thoughts, latches his hands onto Kaio's belt, and levels things up with a force-out. 12 wins apiece. They're down to fight the final match of the final day, and Tokyo's tongues are wagging ever more. Who's it gonna be? The good son or the prodigal one?
I think Asashoryu will get this,
says the ex-Azumazeki Oyakata at day 14 morning practice.
In the early stages, he's not yet focused, but he really in the zone now.
That afternoon, Hakuho hits Koto Mitsuki with a fine outer arm throw. Asashoryu then beats Kaio with the most sublime, zigzagging force-out you are likely to see, and again glares at the seated Hakuho. 13 wins apiece, and an all-Yokozuna decider to be fought in front of 9,000 Japanese fans, a smattering of Westerners, and 2,000 raucous Mongolians, most of whom have travelled over especially. Such is the pride staked that only the disgrace of defeat can compare to the honour of victory. It's the match that will define both their careers.